YouTube? It's Monday. I'm washing clothes, and I promised you some YouTube videos today. Today is going to be the first episode on my premiere channel, Sex Game, Television and Film versus Comics, Part 1. It's a part of my new series. I guess you can call it a YouTube documentary. I'm going to make at least 4 episodes. There won't be, episode 2 might be before the end of this week. Now, as for episode 3 and 4, you might have to wait for those a lot more longer, because with my new job, I have to come to work on Saturday and Sunday, back to back. 8 plus 8 is 16 hours. So that's 2 days, that's Saturdays and Sundays. You will not be seeing me make any videos because I'll be at work. I have to complete my orientation training. It's actually required, and it's paid orientation training. You don't show up, you don't get paid, then they can just terminate you if you don't show up. So I have to, that'll be a Saturday and Sunday. You won't be getting no videos for like at least 2 to 3 days. You won't be getting no videos, basically, if that's the case. Now let's start off this first episode, shall we? Now, the problem that I've noticed in Hollywood with television and film is that the vast majority audience loves the movies and the television. Like, if you're talking about Marvel, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we love the Iron Mans, the Thors, the Captain Americas. We like the Hulks, we like the Avenger movies. But you have what they call the comic book purists, the one who feels like the comic books, the graphic novels, are the perfect interpretation of those characters that we see in television and film. And most people express that frustration when they watch their favorite beloved characters that they went to high school and college with as a kid and a teenager and as a young adult be portrayed on television and film. One could be outraged when those characters are not portrayed in the proper light. A prime example of this would be the Hellboy movies. Some people did not like the PG-13 versions of Hellboy from 13 years ago because they were too kid-friendly and it was catering towards kids. Whereas the rated R version, it catered toward mature audiences, but the movie still kind of failed because you still didn't get a proper representation of who and what Hellboy is. That's just one prime example. Another one would probably be the first Captain America movie, Captain America First Avenger. Very well written film, very well written, very well directed, very good detailed story. Now, there were certain moments in that first Captain America First Avenger movie where it was a little cheesy, a little corny. There were some things in the movie that didn't make no sense, but it was Captain America for the most part. It's not until the second story and the third story of Steve Rogers that we get a close to a proper interpretation. Now, where in the comic books, there's stuff in the Captain America comics that could have made it into the movies. We got the story of the Winter Soldier. That's the closest interpretation I've ever seen of the Winter Soldier. Civil War, it was very well written, very well directed. Some people felt there were other comic book characters that could have been in the movie. Like, for some people, they thought Wolverine should have showed up in there, which at that time they did not have the rights to buy Fox, or they were on their way to buying Fox, and that's how that actually happened. But even if you try to add in other characters in the movie, then you mess up the story plot and the character development, because then it's overflown with too many characters in one movie. A prime example of a movie that tried to do that was Mortal Kombat 2 Annihilation. That's like almost 15 years ago. The director who directed all the Resident Evil films, he did direct Mortal Kombat and came back and directed the second film, and he started throwing all the characters from the video games of Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, and it got so confusing to the audience, it didn't make no sense. They brought in Scorpion, they made him a ghost. People were upset what they did to Scorpion. People was mad that Sub-Zero was on camera for 20 minutes. So they showed you Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and then when their purposes were served, that was the end of their story. You know, they showed you Rain. You know, they showed you Ermac. They showed you Nightwolf. I'm talking about Mortal Kombat 2. It's like 13, 14 years ago. And they said that was by far the worst Mortal Kombat movie ever because it had too many characters and could nobody figure out who was who in that movie. So those are prime examples of what happens if you take something from a video game, which I'm probably going to make that part 2. So I'm just trying to give you prime examples on what happens. Now, there are times where the movies and the TV shows are just as great as their comic book graphic novel counterparts. Now, the first Avengers film was pretty good. Now, the second Avengers film, it was good, but the plot and the villain they picked was so predictable that people were upset that they could have picked a more better villain in the second Avengers movie, which, yeah, I agree with. Now, when I look back at that second Avengers film, you could have had another villain like the Mandarin. You could have had a story of a clone of Red Skull. That would have been the perfect time to introduce Doctor Doom in the second Avengers film. I'm saying how the second film was nothing like the first one. Like, the first one was badass and epic. The second one, it kind of felt short in stature. Some people were a little upset by the fact they didn't get the villain that they thought they should have got. Iron Man 3 is another prime example, where, again, they try to convince you they're going to have the ultimate bad villain that's going to give Iron Man a true challenge, and they made the Mandarin into a joke, which pissed off a lot of comic book fans. People who watched the movies and the TV shows at the time, they didn't quite understood what was the anger and the rage of Iron Man 3. Same thing if you watch Thor 2. Some people didn't like Thor fighting the Dark Elves. They wanted him to fight Helen, which you got Helen, but you got her in the third movie. And even after that movie, there were complaints that they wanted to see the dark version of that movie of Thor Ragnarok and not prefer to see a Thor comedy. So some of these movies, they do get overhyped. People do get upset with these films. They do get upset at the fact that these movies do not portray their characters in strong light. Then you have some characters in the very beginning that they played around with too much, and it weren't until after, the second or third movie they had to kind of like tweak these characters, repackage them up, and make them a little bit more serious. Like Hawkeye. Like in the first Avengers film, you're getting the Hawkeye from the actual comic books. The thing is, you don't see that much of them. Second Avenger film, you're getting you some more Hawkeye that is very accurate to its comic book counterpart. It isn't until we get to Captain America Civil War that they got a little upset that they were trying to make him out to be like the nice guy of the Avengers, and some people really weren't feeling that. And when they repackaged Hawkeye and made him a dark character in the second Avenger movie, which would be Avengers Endgame, you got an even another interpretation of Hawkeye close to its comic book counterpart. Same thing with the movie Logan. A lot of people love the movie Logan because it got close to showing you the Wolverine that you read in comic books for years. Now, some argue that the Wolverine we got in the first 3 X-Men films was Wolverine from the Ultimate X-Men comics, which was pretty okay. No one complained about that version and that interpretation of Wolverine because it was played by Hugh Jackman. Now, when they tried to give us the origins of Wolverine, again, we got something that came from the comic book, which is Origins of Wolverine. When we got to the sequel of the Wolverine, it was close to its comic book counterpart. I mean, they gave you some of the traditional characters that is a part of that story plot. Some people prefer that if they could have had the female Wolverine, Lady Deathstrike, who is Wolverine's female equal in combat, you might actually get that the second time around. So basically, this first episode is to basically give you a breakdown and explain its television and film versus comics part 1, because it's a new original concept series. 4 episodes. Every time I do an episode, it will be talking about something completely different. Like, it'll still be for the most part, me talking about television and film, it'd be more like a compare and contrast, something new, something fresh, something that's not been explored here on YouTube, something that will probably grab your interest. And I know some people are going to want me to talk about, well, what do you think about Star Wars and Star Trek? What do you think about those movies and TV show concepts? And that might be spin-offs, because I want to make it 4 episodes, because I don't know if this is going to be well received. Sometimes when I make new series, people don't always take a liking to my new content, and some people take a liking to my new content. So we're starting off with 4 videos, and if it's well received, then we'll try to really make this interesting. Now, in episodes 3 and 4, I'm going to start interviewing people that all they do is read comic books and graphic novels, and you're going to hear their personal take on what's the difference between the movies, the television shows, and the comic book counterparts. Part 1 is usually the most boring video of the documentaries that I do, because it just gives you a breakdown of the history lesson. And a lot of people can't stand history lessons. They just want to get straight to the good parts, because that's what they live for on the internet. It was the same thing with my martial arts series. I gave you 4 videos. I told you the first one was a little boring, which it kind of was. It still was well received. It ain't until I got to episodes 2, 3, and 4 that you really got your money's worth. And it'll be like the same thing with this. So part 1 is the introduction, which usually is boring to a lot of people. A lot of people are not going to start watching the documentary until I get to episodes 2, 3, and 4. That's when they're going to like really get into it. I mean, there's a lot of movies, a lot of television shows. Okay, Vampire Diaries, right? The books, for the most part, from what I've been told, the books, they're better than the television show. That's what I get told by a lot of people who love the TV show. The book is a little bit much better than the television counterpart. Same thing with the Hunger Games. You know, that's a book that got made into 4 films. And a lot of people say the books are better to enjoy than wasting your money and time and energy on looking at the movies. Me, when it comes to Hunger Games, I'm like half and half. I'll watch the book, I'll read the books, turn around and watch the movie for a better understanding. When it comes to the Lord of the Rings, to me, it wouldn't matter if I watch the movies or if I read the books. They're all on the same level of greatness. You could read the Lord of the Rings books and watch the first 3 movies of Lord of the Rings that were directed by Peter Jackson, and you got pretty much a good interpretation. Now, The Hobbits is also 3 books, and there are also 3 movies, and they're kind of on the same level. Now, The Hobbits ain't nothing like the first 3 movies of the Lord of the Rings. That much we can agree on. You know, that's like a step down. But again, he made you 6 movies of that mythology of Middle-earth. Other movies that came from books, they don't usually do that very good. Like Diversion is a prime example. They made 4 books of Diversion. They made 2 to 3 movies of Diversion, and then made a Diversion television series. And some people said the TV show was just as bad as the movies, because when they read the books, they feel like the books are much better than the movies and the TV show interpretation. So there's a lot of books that get made into movies and television shows, and they don't come nowhere near close to the books or comic books counterparts. And it causes a clash. There's people who watch the movies and the TV shows versus people who are in love with the comic books and the graphic novels. I know friends that will read the comic books of their beloved icon characters, but will never watch them on television or in film ever. And then I have people that only care to watch these characters in television and film, but will never pick up a comic book. I actually have friends like that, who one tells me the books and the comics is better than television and film. Then I have another group that tells me TV and film is better than the books. Then I have someone who goes, I look at both. I look at the movies and I read the books. So part 1 is just giving you guys a breakdown, some history of the comic book genre and where it's at. Back in the glory days of comics, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, comic books is what got you to want to invest in watching, you know, a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie. You know, the first Batman film with Michael Keaton in it. You know, the first Superman film with Christopher Reeves in it. And then, you know, we got into the 2000s, the comic book industry hasn't been exactly, you know, good. And ever since the movies have taken off, who's reading the comic book? So that's kind of why the title is called Sex Game, Television and Film versus Comics. Someone will agree with this. Someone will disagree with this. Someone will thumbs up the video. Someone will pretty much thumbs down the video. Someone will make a comment saying I'm right. And some of y'all will make a comment saying I'm wrong and I do not know what I'm talking about at all, period. And that's perfectly just fine. This is one of them times where I'm not really doing my usual content, because I promised you in 2020 we would try to make some new content and try to do something new and creative that's fun and exciting.